Ever since the production of the newspaper, images of Native Americans have been constructed with the stereotypes along with inaccurate representations of Native people. The media producer has continued to follow the agenda of the hegemonic power structure and is keeping the audience's knowledge limited of true news about Native Americans.
That I see is that more often than not, the media portrays them as mischief makers, like as criminals. They always show them protesting. They don't show any other aspect of their lives.
I've never seen any positive stories about them. Also, Native Americans are ancient, but I've never seen any modern versions of them. Personally, I think the Native Americans are only seen as symbols, and they should be seen as part of humanity.
My name is Scott Andrews, Scott-Andrews. I'm an associate professor in the English department, but I'm also the coordinator for the American Indian Studies program at Cal State Northridge.
In your opinion, have Native Americans been misrepresented in the media, and how so?
If we're talking about the news media and news reports, American Indians are getting much better representation now than they did in the past, but they still have limited roles, you would say, in their reporting. When you see reports about poverty, when you see reports perhaps about conservation of nature, or when you see reports about casinos and their influence and gambling, etc. That's about the three roles they get limited to for news reports. But in the past, they would have been treated more as welfare recipients and victims of poverty, and generally we see less of that, but it's still there, that the American Indian serves as a symbol of poverty or injustice in America. And while some of that is true, that is limiting, and that's not their only role. There's American Indian doctors, lawyers, people going to college. There's all sorts of American Indians are just like other Americans in that they have very diverse lives, but that diversity doesn't tend to get represented much in the media.
Have you seen any patterns in which Native Americans are being represented? And is there a difference of how they were represented in the past to modern days?
One big difference between the first half of the 20th century and the second half of the 20th century and now in the 21st century is in the past, American Indians weren't asked much about themselves. It would be some white expert talking about issues, some college professor, some government official. Now that tribal governments are much more organized, much more visible, if you see news reports about American Indians, at least now there is an effort to get an American Indian official to talk about the issue, or an American Indian college professor to talk about the issue. And so in that sense, American Indians are getting more of a voice in mainstream media than they had in the past, when it was just assumed there would be no one to talk for them in any sort of official or authoritative way.
I came across an extraordinary scene of a Lakota family pushing a car with no petrol, but with a TV on the back seat.
Why are we going to the pawn shop? I'm going to the pawn shop because I want to hawk that TV right there to get us something to eat at a covered wagon in Gordon.
This is a tragedy, Justin.
It ain't a tragedy to me.
It's not a tragedy.
This is everyday life to a Lakota.
Alcoholism, with its roots in the despair of poverty, pervades Pine Ridge.
The Al Jazeera report is interesting because a lot of what it says about poverty at Pine Ridge is true, and there are healthcare issues on many of the reses that are isolated. But it's not the only story that's told. Alcoholism, despair, low life expectancy, domestic violence, those things plague some American Indian communities, but that's not the only story to tell. But too often it's the only story told on mainstream media. American Indians just become a symbol of poverty or despair, but there is a much richer, much more diverse story to be told.
Okay.